the Wicked Theory podcast. You might be confused. It sounds a little different, or maybe not. I'm still here. You can't get rid of me, man. It's basically my show. So this is a very different episode than what you may be used to, but we warned you. I'm changing things around here. Shifting gears. Forming up a different kind of Wonder Twin. Who's just one? Well, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea what that means. Ignore it. My name is Bill Sweeney. You might remember me from previous episodes, but not much else. And I have a guest with me today. If you've seen the description, you already know who it is, but I'll drag it out anyway. Let's get some official business out of the way. If you're missing me because you don't hear me as much, you can check me out on WCBJ Radio. That is the podcast that I do for my local comic shop, Comic Book Jones. So WCBJ Radio is the name of the podcast. Right now, I think it's just on Apple Podcasts, and then maybe whatever scrapes that and kind of like has it there. So just search for us on your device of choice and check us out over there. It's a lot of shenanigans. It's a lot of hooting and hollering. It's recorded in the store, and there's a prize wheel. We give away stuff. It's really not safe for work. It's kind of the opposite of whatever you think a podcast should be for a comic shop. This is kind of not quite that. But if you dig what this show has ever been, I think you would dig that. So check it out. We lost all the old episodes, so it's a brand new feed. It should have 3 or 4 episodes in it. When you find it, if you find something else that won't play episodes, that's not the right feed. There might be some residual thing floating around. We don't know. But find us and listen, subscribe, rate, review, support us over there, please. It's a new show. It's growing. And it would be crazy if I saw some kind of telltale signs that somebody who knew me from over here popped up over there somehow in a review or an email or something like that. That would be crazy. I would definitely be super excited to have that happen. But what I'm kind of excited about tonight is that in the process of changing the format of this show, I'm doing something a little different, but it's an idea I had back when I started thinking about what I would do with a podcast, how I would get together with people and break down stuff, and different ways to do that. So one of the ideas was to find something pop culture related and have that be the singular thing that we kind of cover more or less. But so from the description, you probably already know who I'm making wait patiently on the Skype and what we'll be talking about. So this is the thing where, like, I listen to other podcasts, and sometimes they do this to somebody. They torture them as they sit in the studio or sit nearby, or not. Like maybe this whole thing I'm segueing into is pre-recorded and you just don't know. And I don't know. I don't think I could possibly vamp anymore. But if you want to send me an email, you can send it to podcast@wickedtheory.com. Check me out on Twitter as Wicked Theory on the Twitters, and that's it. Media is it's a blast. But I'm on Instagram, Wicked_Theory, if you want to find me over there. And I will now introduce the patient individual, technically to my right, although it's in digital form only. His name is his web address. It is his Instagram. It is his Twitter. Just search for Agent Palmer and you will find him. Long-time friend, good friend, and a regular contributor, and sometimes formerly kind of a producer behind the scenes. Agent Palmer, hi, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Bill. How are you?
I feel like I've lost you volume. I lost you volume in the mix a little bit. I might have been playing with my knobs. Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Bill. How are you?
There's my pal. I'm good. How did you like this long-winded intro I did that took roughly 5 minutes?
So I wanted to interrupt with my repository for all things hate mail when you were doing the email.
Right. Sure.
But I think the rest of it went very well.
Oh, thanks, man.
I will say that I want to reiterate that not only is this a idea Bill has had since he talked about what his show might be so many years ago on The Stranger Conversations. But Bill and I have had this conversation about a singular topic episode conversation, whatever,
Sure,
on and off since I got behind the scenes and went down into the basement of Wicked Theory Labs.
Yeah. It's a thing that kept. My Russian accent slips right through all the time. It kept on coming up to me, comrade. I've been watching Chernobyl on HBO. It's very good series. Traumatic, crazy thing. Between that and Barry, I've got the whole European Eastern Bloc covered. I think the key to the guy on Barry, I know you don't watch Barry, but the key to the guy on Barry who's doing the accent, who from Gotham, who played Zaz on Gotham.
Yeah.
So he plays like a Chechnyan. He's not really from Chechnya, I don't think. I think they make up some country. But he puts K's on where there's supposed to be an H. So it's Barry, we have to go get the heroin. Like there's a KH sound, the heroin. I'm slowly learning what his tricks are. But so if you like pop culture talk, there's two things I've been watching lately.
Yeah.
I will say Chernobyl is equal parts like great just across the board, writing and quality wise, but it's equally like disturbing and messed up because of the way like they're showing you how everybody reacted on the official level, like when that thing happened, when that
It wasn't my fault. I wasn't in the room.
There's a little
I
bit
didn't do it.
There's some of that. It's a lot of quick denial to everybody. Like it's impossible. It could not break. Please. They don't even have the Russian accents. I'm just doing Russian accents for no reason.
I know.
It's impossible to break it. I'm sorry. You cannot break it. You tell me how it breaks. And, the guy's like, look, there's just crazy radiation outside my building, and I'm far away. So I'm telling you what happened. But, 2 episodes on that so far as of this recording, and really good. Recommend that shit. Recommend Barry. Pretty much anything that those guys at HBO do. Pretty good.
But what are we here to do this evening?
Man, look at you. Still wearing that producer hat. Is it tight?
I just can't take it off.
It's kind of looking a little ratty. Like, I feel like, maybe you need to put it in the wash. In the wash. We are doing a thing where I don't know what to call the segment, this idea. We don't, the listener, they already know what we're going to do.
Yes,
generally
they do.
speaking. But the idea of what and why, where the idea was like this thing where like I feel like, everybody always kind of comes late to something. Like you kind of just stumble upon this thing. Oh, at the time when it came out, everybody was talking about it. I never really kind of saw it. I'm the odd man out on it. I'm late to the party. And that was kind of like the running idea for the name of the bit, like late to the party. I couldn't figure out another euphemism for that. So if anybody wants to send an email to podcast@Wicked Theory and suggest a segment name for this or a jingle, once we figure out a real name, hey, send it my way. I will use it. And I tell you now, you'll get paid nothing. Maybe I'll send you a sticker. It's a tight budget. It's a tight budget. And that's if you don't already have one. If you have a sticker already, you're not getting another one. They're very limited supply. So the idea was that, because I always get, I used to feel like I would get some, shit from friends. It's like, oh my God, you haven't seen that yet? Like Anchorman? Like you haven't seen Anchorman? Like what are you, like a jerk? What are you, like some kind of Neanderthal? Like, what's your problem? And it's like, dude, it's just a movie. I mean, I'm sure you have a list of those kinds of movies you haven't seen either. So the other day, Palmer let slip, I haven't seen The Matrix. And I was like, what? So I'm like, I feel like that's like an easy out. But it goes back to my point that just like it's the craziest thing in this world that some of these, even the biggest movies, can kind of somehow fall through the cracks for some people. Where it's like, oh, I just never got around to it. Don't hate me. What's it like not having seen The Matrix? Do you have that situation where that would come up in conversation and
No,
people
you know
would
what?
kind of ever say like, dude, you haven't seen it yet?
So this ties into I wanted to for my own like I told you when we were going to do this like I'm not going to look anything up.
Right.
But the only thing I did look up was what movies were out in 1999 because I was like because I don't know how I missed this either.
Mm-hmm.
So Phantom Menace came out in 1999.
Boo.
That I saw in a midnight showing.
Okay.
Blair
Interesting.
Witch, I remember seeing opening weekend in 99.
Okay.
Sixth Sense, Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
I
Fight
can't-
Club.
I'm trying to think of if there was anything. I think that was pretty much it. Like that of like, I just did a little quick Google search, like 1999 movies. Those were the big ones that I remember seeing in theaters. Now I've seen a lot of the other ones from that year.
Mm-hmm.
And how The Matrix got missed, I have no idea.
Right.
I really don't, except that was the year I got my license. So depending on when The Matrix dropped,
Right.
I went through.
You were
we
busy.
all have-
You were busy doing donuts in a parking lot somewhere. Like you just got your license. You and your buddies. You were getting like 40-ounce, 40-ounce tall boys or whatever, like Saint Ides,
not
and
quite.
smoking blunts.
I'm
Wait,
I'm
no,
way more
wait, no,
straight edge.
that was my high school.
There you
Right,
go.
Gotcha.
Um,
I'm transferring.
So before I sat down to actually watch it, I tried to figure out like what do I know about The Matrix, like going in, right?
Right, yeah.
I
So
know
this was kind of like part of the conversation that we were having about like what's the format on this thing that we're
Yeah.
doing, and it's like, well, we don't want to go deep academic crazy, but it is kind of like what's your experience with it? Like, how did you? What was that like? In general. But then also we'll talk about like, as we go over the movie, actually, we'll just kind of touch base on some initial thoughts that we had. Kind of, it was not really quite the in-depth review people are used to. Just to preface what we're doing here.
I will say, skipping ahead real quick, the scene at the very end where he's
Skipping ahead, that's like skipping it
where
all.
he's avoiding the bullets.
Oh my god.
Somehow I saw that scene. I don't know if it's part of the trailer because I did watch the trailer and I don't remember the trailer either. Like, so I don't know how I saw just that sequence.
Well, I'll tell you how you probably saw. Wait, which part?
Just where he's,
On the
doing,
roof.
yeah.
Yeah, that's because that's the bullet time stuff that was like the one clip they showed every time like some show was talking about The Matrix.
Okay.
So if somebody was doing like Entertainment Tonight or the trailer or even any kind of pop culture thing you might have watched on YouTube where it's like here's the top 10 greatest movies that ever existed, and then like number 7 is The Matrix. Keanu Reeves.
That's the scene they all use.
Probably, I would say like that's like the one of like when we talk about like what's our iconic frames from this movie, like that's probably the most iconic one,
And then the only other thing I knew was from you was Red Pill, Blue Pill.
Oh, sure.
I might have picked it up somewhere else, but like that's literally that's it. I knew Keanu Reeves was in it,
right?
But other than that, I came at this like fairly blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
because for me, I found it like it was definitely a movie I missed in the theaters, and I knew a lot people were crazy for it. And then when it came out on DVD, I believe if I remember this correctly, I bought that and like a PlayStation, whichever PlayStation, if it was 1 or 2 at the time, probably 2. Yeah, because I don't think PlayStation 1 could play movies.
Yeah, that would have been 2.
Yeah, so it was 2. I bought both of them at like the same day. It was part of it. and although like I just kind of gleaned the wiki for it a little bit. I knew it had broken some kind of records for DVDs, and it turns out like it was the first DVD to break 1 million, and it was the first DVD to also break 3 million. But I mean, I think that would be fucking obvious. Um, but and I think supposedly there was an article I'd read at some point that talked about how like that movie literally helped sell DVD players. Much like myself, who went in and bought a PlayStation,
Yeah,
and that at the same day because that's why I wanted a PS2 so bad. It was just because like I don't need a DVD player now. I just have this.
exactly.
You know, it was the joy of that system, but it was definitely a thing where you know that movie itself helped push people through. So for me, I came to it late in that regard. And I remember specifically, I've told a story on earlier episodes that my brother Bobby like was like, oh man, like I tried to sell him. I was like, after I watched it, I brought it right to him. I was like, you gotta watch this, and he was like, oh man, come on, like what the fuck, like you know, John, you know, it's like he had Johnny Mnemonic like stuck in his head.
For
And
Keanu.
for Keanu and Keanu
Okay.
Reeves in general, who was kind of like you know, for some people was kind of like a, you know, laughable or kind of like you know, like a pretty stoic one trick pony kind of. And so it was kind of hard to believe that I'm sitting here going, no, 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 it's awesome. Like, like it's not what you think at all, and it's 100 times better than whatever you're thinking. Um, so that's like the only real stories I got for like where I was at the
Yeah,
time and stuff. It's all
I
hazy.
I want to get back to something you said. You asked that I kind of, how did I miss this for so long, right? And
Sure.
I think it's because at that back in 1999, I really only had one geek friend. Like
Okay.
I had friends, but there's only one friend that I was hanging around that we would geek out about stuff, right? So
Sure.
I don't, but we weren't living in the same town, or we were, and then he went away to college or whatever. Like, so like there was some distance, and I think it never really came up. We never really talked about it. And then I think it was just an assumption that why would you ever like why would you ask me if I had seen that movie? You would just make an assumption.
Yeah, I can
Like
see that.
it just doesn't come up. And then time goes by and it's like, well, that's just like a classic movie. It's like, who hasn't seen Citizen Kane?
Well,
You no, well, but like for cinephiles, it's the same thing. So for
sure.
geeks
Okay.
of a certain age,
Fair
it would be
enough.
the same thing.
Yeah.
And it just never came up. And The Matrix was never really one of those movies that would ever like I've never come across it on cable television. I'm sure it has been, but I've never seen it in the same respect as I've seen other movies just pop up.
Right, right. Because that's something I was thinking about myself. Is that like I feel like because you asked me the other night, like, well, how many times have you seen it? And I was like, I think 4 times maybe, but I can't say for sure that I've ever that those are all consistent straight through. Like put it in, put it on. But I know when it was like I had seen it, got like obsessed about it, like was super into it. Bought the um Art of the Matrix book that has it's a hardcover. It's like a $60 book. It's like oversized. It's got the script, and it's got all of this you know original production artwork, which is stuff from a couple of guys I already knew from comics because they hired these particular guys, Steve Skroce and Jeff Darrow, um, who you know Skroce did the storyboards, and Darrow did a lot of like mechanical design.
Okay.
But these guys, Darrow especially, I mean, Scroce did like Spider Man and stuff like that. He's got that kind of a style, like you can kind of see. We're like, oh, okay, like, you know, if you know comics, he's kind of like a Mark Bagley who drew Spider Man for a long time, kind of thing. Very cartoony. And then Darrow's got like this technical thing where um, he's known for these highly detailed kind of like line drawings, his line drawing style. But anyway, my point being just that like I got obsessed. I picked up this book, and there was a website, whatisthematrix.com, and it would have like all these little hidden things that sometimes they would update. Even still at that point, which was like I found it relatively late, like you know once it came home to home video services. Um, so yeah, so I had taken the pill for sure. I had swallowed probably both of the pills. Was what it was.
And I will say it's kind of interesting that I haven't run into anybody. So this is one of those movies that got like canonized the moment it came out. And there were people who liked it, and then there were evangelicals. And every so often a movie comes along that's like that. Like, yeah, people love the Marvel movies, but I don't really hear anybody like being evangelical about like this one, oh my God, like if you don't see, like, no.
Maybe you're not traveling in those circles as much.
It's possible, but like I know The Matrix was one of those early films where it was just like, if you're not in this, like, it was, for some people, it was the second coming of the first Star Wars where they saw it in the theater like 100 times.
Right.
I never ran into that guy. It's kind of like music, right? Like you have that, growing up, if you don't run into like that Pink Floyd fan, you might never hear Pink Floyd until you're like 30. Like, but you have to run into that guy who's like super diehard. You have to listen to this.
Yeah.
We're going to listen to this together.
Right. You have some experience where you listen to more than one track and you really get a sampling of it. I can understand that. Sure.
I never ran into that guy as far as The Matrix is concerned.
I never had an appreciation for Steve Miller until I went on a camping trip with my older brothers, and then then the best of Stephen Miller was played like a lot. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, I am flying like an eagle.
He is more than just the Joker.
He
right?
is. He
like,
is. And everybody's a midnight toker in the woods, man. So fly like an eagle.
Well, speaking of drugs, that's my first note.
That's your first note?
My first note.
So hold on a second. Let's get into this here. So I don't have hard segue music, but I have a little bit of, I feel like a track where it's got some breakbeat. It feels Matrix-ish for like the first 40 seconds. So this is it. Let's get into it. We don't have to get crazy. You do have more notes than me. And that's fine. That's fine. Let's get deep on the Matrix, and you're going to start with the drugs, of all places.
Because there's a mescaline reference.
Okay.
And mescaline is not a run of the, especially in 1999. That's not a. That.
Yeah, it was gone. It was gone about 5 years then.
Yeah.
So, at least locally for me.
For me, mescaline takes me to two places. And I've never done it, but I've read about it. Because mescaline is one of those 60s drugs that like authors used to do. And so it takes me to two people, Aldous Huxley.
Okay.
Because I read The Doors of Perception, which is all about tripping on mescaline.
Right.
And Hunter S.
Sure.
Because Fear and Loathing, I mean, it's just one of the many.
Oh, it's on the list of the stuff for the trunk. You know?
And so I just kept thinking, like, is that where we're going? Like, we want to be mind expanding, and so we have to put in the mescaline reference because the 60s mind expanding writers all mention mescaline. Like, is that where we're starting? Like, because I couldn't, like, it happens in like the first couple minutes.
Well, here's the thing too, like,
dropped.
Since you were watching it, you didn't really kind of go in with a perfectly clean slate. Like, you knew we were going to have a conversation about it, but you also knew that, like, this is a movie that's supposedly layered with all this extra references and.
So I was looking for it a little bit.
Yeah, right. That's what I was kind of saying. Was that you were kind of, but that didn't stand out to me really. But I will say, as far as mescaline goes, I think if this was in '99, the last time I took mescaline. Boy, am I sharing a story. Was probably, I'll say 92, 3 or 4, something like that. It was high school time for me. It was probably, I was probably like a seniorish age, but it was something that popped up. It was something that popped up and disappeared real fast. You know.
I want to talk to you about that at another time on another episode.
That's another. Okay. Yeah. Okay. When we do drug movies.
Yeah.
Right.
So, the next thing that comes up for me is that Neo.
Right.
Is Thomas Anderson.
Well, hold on a second, because we'll get back to that. Because here's the thing. I didn't have my notes in front of me, so what I wanted to ask you. Yeah. Is about the opening sequence.
Yeah.
where it's Trinity, and you don't know who she is. You don't know what's going on with her. Any thoughts on that? Like, did that seem like a crazy thing? Did it impress at any level? Was it like a thing where like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here? Because when she does that whole jump in the air kick thing,
Yeah. The
like that's
honestly, it's. I guess I suspended my belief because I had no idea what I was getting into.
but it just kind of came off
Um,
as like a stylized
it's
kind of
it's
fight scene thing,
stylized.
right? Like it didn't
It's
seem
style.
like it wasn't like tipping the hand in any way that this is a
No,
different
no,
world.
no, 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 no. It's just like, oh, all right, whatever. Like,
Yeah,
okay, so she's just that much. I mean, let's put it this way: it didn't see, and this is where what I've watched since 1999 that wasn't The Matrix kind of. So, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon doesn't happen in another world, right? Like
sure,
it's a kung fu movie, I'll
right.
grant you, but like they and they don't fly, but they can make those jumps and they can
Yeah,
make those kicks.
yeah.
So like it's like I just watch that and go like, all right, okay.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. It just comes off as like a stylized fight scene moment.
yeah, it doesn't
Right.
trip
I
anything.
was
I feel
curious
like
about that because I noticed that they were playing coy with what was going on and where this was kind of a
it
thing.
I will
Like,
say they give her um an amount of confidence that you have no idea where she gets it from.
right,
Like, because
right,
that's the only like question is like, well, why the fuck does she think she can get away?
right.
Whatever. Because like, I'm not so the end of that scene. What Agent Smith, right, is the one
Mhm.
who is in the like just runs through the fucking telephone booth.
Oh, he
And
drives a truck through it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. What
I'm
about
not
the?
surprised.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
not surprised she got away. Like for whatever reason, like through the
Right.
buildup, and maybe it's other movies. Like I feel like if I was watching this for the first time in 1999 and I
Yeah.
hadn't seen a lot of other things, like maybe it'd been like, well, where'd she go? But
Right.
I was like, no, she got away. Like she made an impossible jump and jumped 30 feet in the air and kicked a guy in the head. Like,
They're just not
okay,
showing us. They're just not
yeah,
showing us her dive away from the phone booth or something.
yeah.
Right. And then the impossible dive off the roof, where they're
Yeah,
chasing her across the rooftops, and it's like this.
it's movie magic, baby. Like
Right,
what?
right, right.
I
But
don't
that's
know.
also, coming off to you as just, oh, it's a stylized thing. I mean, you come to learn later on in the movie that like they're able to break the laws of the world, and that's like
Yeah,
because for me on the rewatch, it was a little bit of like because that's the thing that's going on here. It's your first time, but it's like
yeah.
my first time in a long time. So like I'm kind of looking at some of it like, oh, okay. Like I'm story wise, I'm looking at like, how they planted certain seeds, and
Yeah.
I wondered how they would kind of maybe turn somebody off if like they were going through the channels and you click on literally the moment where
I'll
she does that dive. It looks hokey or super
I'll
exaggerated to the point
I'll
where
s-
you might be like, what the fuck is this?
what I'll say is knowing Keanu Reeves is in it and
Right.
being like, what, where, what, who's this? Like
Right.
that's in the back of your head. Like I didn't make that as a note, but like I
Sure.
that's in the back of my head. Like okay, okay, okay.
Hmm.
What?
Hmm.
Um,
So fair enough. Okay, so to you now, you were gonna mention his name,
yeah, Thomas Anderson,
right?
and I just went, is that a reference?
Right, and you mentioned that to me last night, and I didn't catch it.
Yeah, because what did I say to you? You're like, who's that? I was like, Tom. Everybody. He's everybody's friend.
And I still didn't
Because
get it.
Tom Anderson was the MySpace guy.
Right, and I never really, I don't know if I knew his name even, his last name even then, but because it would just be Tom, like
Yeah,
you know what I mean, in your friend's thing. But yeah, like I
and
guess maybe.
I didn't know.
Mm.
And as we get further in, and it's the Matrix. It's connected. It's this digital. I was like, is this some sort of like coy like super level like
Is this an
I'm sure.
actual right?
Look, we're in 2019 now. Like, if you look that up, I'm sure there are articles
Yeah,
that like
yeah.
people dove into that, even though it's like the super minority.
Well, as
But
far
like
as
my
that
brain
goes, to wrap it, like I did check because I went through the wiki today just to see if there was anything that really stuck out at me, and then so I did a search on the name Thomas Anderson because we had this conversation, and it pulls up the list of everybody who's Thomas Anderson who's listed, and I don't know that there's any real obvious standouts. There's some scientists, some bioscientists, there's some politicians, there's this, that, the other, but nothing that really says, oh, that's fits with all the other name drops they do, you know? But let's move along because I know you have a lot
Yeah.
of notes. My next one really is just that. How did you feel about all the outdated tech, like in the Matrix world?
So the digital screens I can deal with. This is what I wrote down.
Okay.
Phones and tapped phone lines date this movie more than any other piece of tech. Like the computers I can deal with, the
Right.
multiple monitors, some of them are like kind of flat panel, like I get it, they're not widescreen, that's fine. But the fact that they're phones, and even like that, going back to that opening scene, like of a Bill, when's the last? You're in New York City, but like, when's the last time you saw a phone booth, and it wasn't Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure on TV?
It was
like,
the movie phone booth. Like that was the last time I saw a phone booth. Was that movie where the
and
guy's
that movie
trapped?
killed them all. They were like, "This doesn't work."
Right. And that's the whole problem with that movie. I will say that the Nokia, though, the Nokia phone that.
So that was a phone I never had. Like I never even saw anybody with it. Like in 1999, I had the brick Nokia, not the cool slide Nokia.
Yeah, the little pop
like,
out. Yeah.
That was like, I was all right. That actually, even today, that cell phone seems futuristic.
It still
like,
seems cool that it
yeah.
clicks out like that and the mouthpiece drops. Like, I'm like, was that ever really a model that they had? You know what I mean? Or was that just a cool thing they did for the movie? And I'm still not sure, like, to be honest with you.
Cool. I don't know. I feel like they would have been everywhere if it wasn't just a cool thing. Like, we would know, is my point.
Sure.
Like,
it would have became a thing. It would have been like a sidekick. Everybody would have had one for a while.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll say before we move on, past like the first opening stuff, is that so I had the subtitles on, so that's how I caught these names. But the guy and the girl that come to his door that offer him the mescaline because he's selling them some kind of disc.
Yep.
It's Choi and Dujour. The girl's name is Dujour. I really felt like this is a personal thing, but I really felt like this would be a good cosplay for you and Steph. I feel like, you've got the reddish brown hair, you've got the beard, I felt like there was a little similarity in her look there at the door between her and Steph. I was like, because that's what started the idea. I was like, she reminded me of Steph a little bit. Like if Steph got all kind of like Betty Paged up, like a future noir Betty Page thing going on. And then later on in the movie, like the similarity in look kind of fades away. But if you did a still shot on that sometime later, go back and take a quick look.
All right.
That's my recommendation if you're ever looking for a good cosplay.
I have one note between where we are now and when Morpheus is talking to Neo.
Okay.
And that is, it's 20 minutes into the movie. Neo's like, why me? Why me?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, Neo is the one because Neo is just one misspelled whatever.
It's a jumble. It's a word jumble. Yeah.
But it's 20 minutes in and they've beaten me over the head with it. Neo, 111. Like I feel like anybody who doesn't make I get it. Like I'm late to everybody makes that connection.
I didn't make it right away. I didn't make that right away. It was like after I watched the movie, I was like a while, like maybe like months or years after I watched the movie. And one day, it wasn't because I read something that pointed out. It was like it popped in my head. I was like, wow, I'm a fucking moron.
Well, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but like it felt like because they were saying like, and you had the captions on, I'm sure looking at it, Neo and one come up in like, it just felt like we didn't go more than like a minute for like a 5 or 6 minute span without Neo and the one being said over and over and over and over. And it's like, I talk to you on a regular basis. I don't think I say your name as much as they said Neo in like a month. Like, it's
the truth.
Like,
it's
Bill,
the truth.
Bill. Like, I was like, I get it.
And the whole movie is like that too. Like you made me think about it just now. It's like I wonder what the count is for both of those. Or which one do they say more? Because it's close. It's got to be close.
It's got to be real close.
It feels like 1 for 1 almost. Like every time there's a scene where someone's saying his name, it's like, he's the one. Who? Neo? Yeah, Neo. He's the one. Are you sure he's the one? That guy Neo? I'm pretty sure Neo. You should watch him. He's the one. All right. So I
Yeah,
have a
I just
note for
yeah.
during the interrogation scene when he goes out on the ledge. He won't jump, and then Smith's guys take him into the interrogation thing, and they do this mouth gag bit on him, which where they seal his mouth shut.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
And the one thing it made me realize, it's a little bit of a hole with the movie, I think. Well, I guess maybe I have the fix for it too. It made me think like, wow, these guys have control over his body physically. Like they should be doing more with that.
Yeah,
Like,
well, it is the I'm gonna guess.
okay.
Is the fix because like that kind of undoes all of the Matrix stuff? Like if I don't have control over my body and he wakes up and it was they can still pass it off as a dream
Well, that's what
because
happens
it
with the
only was the one
scene. Well,
time.
that's what happens with the scene. Like
Yeah,
they put the bug in him. He wakes up. He kind of thinks it was a dream, and then he's like, "Oh
yeah.
shit, it was real." When they go to take it out, but what I realize, kind of now as I was saying it, is that well, at that point when he's still in the pod in the real world, so I bet the same reason they can't jump into Neo, like they jump into other humans throughout the movie, they constantly take over other people's forms,
Yeah.
is because they are hooked into the main system. At a certain point, he's off this main system. He's coming in
See,
through a pipeline. So, like, somehow, like, they can't, because otherwise they would just constantly be like, all right, your eyes are closed. You can't see what you're doing.
and you went somewhere I didn't. I was
Mm,
thinking at it like it's a computer program, it's a simulation. Like there's a bunch of non-player characters that they can just fucking jump into.
right.
Like I was just thinking like it fills the space.
Hmm.
So
Well, that's
like
the
I don't
thing.
know if
I
you're
say
a
that's the thing.
person.
I think in the Matrix they don't do that. In the simulations that the Resistance uses to train, they definitely populate it with NPCs, non-playable
Yeah.
characters. But I think in the Matrix, like everybody's a real person in there,
Okay.
and that's why when Smith and them jump in and out, you know what I mean. That dead body is still there.
Yeah.
Like they warp away or whatever you want to call it, and then the cop is now on the ground and he's got bullet holes in him, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I think the fix actually on my own point is just that like Neo at that point is still hooked up to the main line of the Matrix, and therefore they can manipulate that a little bit. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I fixed my own problem.
All right. So I mean, next up, I go right to Morpheus and the Alice in Wonderland stuff, and
Sure.
it's um. I feel like I'm an elitist when I say this, but like it felt so obvious. Like I want to wake up. I can't believe
Yeah, it's a little
um
heavy-handed. A lot of the analogy and metaphor
and
that
I
they're
don't
throwing through.
listen. There are some listen. I mean there are some good there is some good dialogue and some
Mm,
good philosophy in this movie. But on the other side of that, and maybe this is what balances it out, and for me makes it a good movie instead of a great movie, is
mm,
all that shit that I you if you give me smart dialogue, I don't want you to beat me over the head with this other dialogue.
mm,
And they
mm.
do both, so like that makes it a good movie, not a great movie for me.
Right. I think sometimes when this happens too, a lot of it can be like, behind the scenes, the gestation can be notes from the studio. Like, look, I don't know if other people are going to get what's going on here. Like, studio heads will kind of be obsessive about that. Like, and plus some testing, audience testing too, where, maybe simple ideas are dropped in and repeated a couple times because it's like the concept is different and out there. And so the description and the explanation should be simple, like you know what I mean, kind of a thing. And so sometimes it's a contrast of like, wow, these are like big ideas, really reduced down sometimes, because even in that, the whole, and the repeating of the motif too, because it's like follow the white rabbit down the hole, and we're back after a small technical issue. But you wouldn't have noticed, but I felt compelled to tell you, or dear listener, just in case there's any difference in the audio right now. But we're back. It's me and Palmer. We're still here. You're still here too, listeners. So I don't know why I'm recapping any of that. What I should recap is that I was talking about the White Rabbit and the motifs and these kind of ideas that kind of repeat that we're all familiar with from other things. and then I think you, Palmer, were going to go into a point you wanted to make about.
Yeah, the Wonderland thing is one thing, and I understand it, but there is another thing where as they're talking around the Matrix to Neo, like they're not coming out and saying it, like talking around it, like
Right.
they're talking in metaphors and shit. And one thought keeps coming back and forth running in my head.
Hmm.
And you're going to get the reference. And like 1% of our audience is going to get the reference. But quiddity,
Oh, okay.
quiddity, god damn
Right.
it. Can't even fucking say it. Quiddity just keeps coming back because I'm like, that's technically all about like the dream world and what's real and what's not and reality and bending reality. And I'm like, all right. So I will
Yeah.
say, I did look it up the other night.
Uh,
1989 is when The Great and Secret Show, the first book of the Books of Art by Clive Barker, was written. So it does the idea of quiddity does
I will
predate the
say I
Matrix.
don't know if you're pronouncing it right, but I pronounce it the other way that you want quiddity, like
Yeah.
the way that you want to pronounce it. That's the way I've always pronounced
Yeah,
it.
I know. I don't know. But
Yeah, either way.
the point is like it's there. It's a concept that predates it
Sure.
in publishing by 10 years.
Mm.
And
I wouldn't put it past these guys for one of them to have read that. But that's a book too that kind of like deals with a lot of like, universal kind of ideas where it's like, that's a book literally about, a secrets behind the secrets of the world, what's really going on. Well, it's not about like technology, it's about magic and the perceptions of reality, and it's deep stuff on that level in a kind of like horror slash adventure kind of weird thing that's both but neither.
yeah,
It's probably, if anything, I guess it does lean more horror because like the crazy shit, like
is really crazy.
yeah, like it's got that Clive Barker, Stephen King thing where like when death comes for somebody, it's kind of brutal and shit like that. But
Yeah,
all
it's not like he's not standing at a bus stop like just get on. Get on. Like,
yeah, it runs you over, it backs up, that kind of thing. But yeah, and it's a book that deals more with like as esoteric-ish kind of big brain stuff.
But that definition of what is real,
Right.
which is really like where we're going now. Like we're about to talk red pill, blue pill. But they're talking around it, and even after he takes the pill, like it's still like I don't know, they're still treating like I'm still so unsure at this point in the movie why they're treating him like a baby. Like
Right.
I get you don't want to shock him, but like
yeah. I think really what it is, it's like one of those things like that becomes a little clearer on maybe like a repeat view where it's like, I kind of take it as they're dancing around it so hard so that like if he chooses to not go into it, like they don't have to do as much rework on his brain or to convince him it didn't happen or to reassimilate him into the system because he's jacked into the main system, so it's like probably for them I would think, well, they have to kind of like maybe knock him out and he'll think it's a dream and just hope on that, and then like just stay away from him. You know what I mean? And it does raise an interesting question, like if he had tried to opt out of the service agreement, for lack of a better word, what would Morpheus have done? Because the one thing that happens in this movie is that Morpheus is pretty dead set that this is the guy.
yeah.
And like that's like you said earlier, like the one, the one, the one, the one, the one, the one. Like, and and he has obviously been talking about this guy is the one for so long before he gets there.
Yeah.
That everybody's like, oh, if you're not the one, Morpheus might go in the back and shoot himself. Like that's the kind of way they're talking about him. Like you are going to break him if you. That's going to be bad news for Morpheus if you can't do magic tricks. And so, like, it makes me wonder now. Like, I guess he really didn't have a backup plan, but I don't know. He'd searched for so many, so I guess there was something. They don't get into it, but it makes you do. It did make me wonder. Like, what did Morpheus see beforehand? That we didn't see him see. That made him so convinced that this guy, number 7 here, that I'm going for, or this most recent one, this one's the one.
And it also makes me feel like, and I granted, it's Endgame is not necessarily, or Infinity War is not the way to go to this, but like Doctor Strange saw like, what was it, 14 million outcomes.
Right.
Morpheus saw like 4. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he didn't run through like the alternate of the alternate of the alternate. Like, and he even like, he talked about like, this is the one, like you're it. Like, we've had a few others. They didn't pan out.
You know what I'm thinking now would have been an interesting thing. I wonder if it ever came up in the process is that, like, you know, we'll get to it a little bit later, but Cypher, you know, does what he does mainly only because he just wants to get back into the system. It was an easier life.
Yeah.
But it did make me, now I'm thinking, like, you know, why? Because at first I'm thinking, like, well, maybe it would have been interesting to have somebody there who had been the last one who was going to be the one. And that was like a little bit of a bump, you know what I mean? That was a little bit of a dust up. But if it had been put into Cypher a little bit of another kind of, it might have just felt like more than you needed. But but like it could have added maybe a little bit more to the thing of him kind of being like, this is not for me. You know, like I had my hopes up when I came out because I thought I was going to be the one. Turns out I am not the one, and I am just a tech now on this side. Sometimes I go in, like, you know what I mean? I'm derailing this a little bit.
So let's go back. Bill, red pill, blue pill.
What's it going to be?
For you.
That's what I was going to ask you. I think at that point, after having that whole thing presented to me that way, I got to go for it. I got to check it out. Right?
Yeah. I'm like, I want all the info.
Yeah.
Is really what boys. I don't.
He makes it really hard to say no. Like, you know, he makes
it really hard to say no. But even if he was pointing you towards no, like I would definitely be like, no, I want to know.
Right. Even if he had been less dog and pony show about it and had kind of been like, hey man, just gonna say real quick, I'll give you all the secrets of the world. Take this pill, or take this pill, and you'll wake up tomorrow and just think this was probably a dream. Well, then I might need more convincing to take some random pill from some random dude.
Well, well. Here's the thing. It's kind of like the red pill, like blows your mind, but the blue pill undoes the mind blowing that we've done up to this point. Like that would be a better pitch. Like, all right, red pill, you get to know everything. Blue pill, you forget all about this.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what he says. Like, you'll forget we were here and you'll wake up tomorrow and think this was a dream. I don't know if he says the forget thing, but
yeah, you know, you'll think this is a dream.
But I can see what you're saying.
Enough not to fuck me up for the rest of my goddamn simulation. Like, I don't know.
And who knows? I mean, like, after all that stuff he's talking about and showing, I might start to feel like I was on something then. Like, you know, did you guys already spike my drink? Because this is getting really weird. And how are those sunglasses staying on your face? I'm just, you know.
Did it bother you like every time he was wearing them? Like, come on.
Well, the best part is that when there's a part later on where he puts them back on when they're leaving, and they click. Like he puts them to the bridge of his nose, and there's a soft click you hear, as if like he's got like some kind of like little magnets on his bridge of his nose, and they just kind of snap to. Like as if he's got like the piercing or something going on there that some people have in their nose there.
Must be.
And
then so then we get into the like, all right, nothing's real, or nothing you've experienced is real, and the rise of AI.
Right.
That kind of, and it's, I will say, 2019 me. Having watched season 2 of The Orville.
Okay.
And the rise of AI and what Isaac's fellow, you know, robots.
The Orville of all things. Okay.
You know, I mean, but they did. I mean, that was the rise of it. And they were harvesting humans for like, so it's hard not to go there because it's the most recent iteration.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
But the other part of it is it's not just AI gone wrong, and you know, it's not the Battlestar Galactica of it either, you know, the robot that, but there's something very Orwellian about this, and now is the point in the movie where I go, okay, I think we've hit our tropes. Like we've hit Wonderland, we've hit the Orwell stuff, and then we go one further, and it's a modern trope. but they're like, oh, you're gonna learn. Here's a disc. You'll just learn it.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so now I'm thinking Fifth Element because she learns everything by watching the discs. So I'm like, all right, so now we've gotten like the true sci-fi plus like the Orwellian stuff plus the fantasy of Alice in Wonderland. And I was just like, this is a great movie, but it's still not unique. Like, and I don't mean that to pick on people, but even in Night, because Fifth Element predated, like, the Orville out, but everything else I've mentioned predates this.
Yeah.
So I just keep watching this going like, all right, so we took all the good pieces subconsciously from like all this other cool shit and like put it together, but in like
new packaging.
New packaging and with a slightly different spin because Alice in Wonderland didn't quite have an Orwellian vibe, and
well, I think the Alice in Wonderland is one of the kind of tropes that's like more like it's here it's more of the metaphor of the world behind the curtain, or not even so much in Alice in Wonderland. I think the Alice in Wonderland reference and trope here just kind of signifies this crazy journey that you may not be ready for. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's like outside of that, like the stories don't really have any overlap. Other stories do. There's other stories. I mean, like if you go into it, I think there's stories that like they're accused of actually directly lifting certain elements from. You know what I mean? Stuff that might just be off of our radar because we haven't read or watched or seen those. But I think the thing what's cool in a way is, they're able to kind of do this hodgepodge thing, take a lot of these separate ideas, rework them, and then if you're taking the ride enough, if the visuals are compelling enough, you're taking the ride anyway.
Yes.
Even if you feel, because that's usually what's good. A good movie will do that if it's kind of using stuff that you've seen or heard before, and that, and you kind of feel that, but you don't give it too much weight because you're still vested.
Yeah.
It's when they've kind of lost you already, and then you start to notice shit like that, and you're like, all right, here we go. Sure.
Yeah.
It can start to feel like a checklist if you're already kind of detached. So, but you were kind of grounded. You were still in it at that point.
I was still in it at that point. So Morpheus fighting Neo in the training,
right, in the dojo scene.
I had a takeaway from that, but not from the fighting. Like the fighting is whatever it is. Like I get it. Like, I will tell you, I will say this first and foremost, because it'll come up again and we'll just cover it now. The way it's shot and the visual effects do not date this movie as much as I expected it to. Like, go back and watch the original Jurassic Park or whatchamacallit from Terminator. Like some of those effects, you watch those movies and other things date those movies, but those effects still hold up very relatively well.
Yeah.
And in this scenario, like it didn't take me out of it. Like that's all I'm looking for effects is don't take me out of the movie.
Yeah.
And these did take me out of it. Yeah. And watching an older movie and having effects not take you out is even like harder to pull off.
Right. Yeah. Like there's only a couple of shots that really kind of pull you out. And it's not so much because they're outlandish. It's kind of just because of the green screen effect. When I talked earlier about how she does that window dive from the roof, it's, the window dive itself is ridiculous, but it's this cut to shot where like the green screen behind her kind of looks a little phony, a little fishy. It's brief. It's super brief, but it's just enough to feel like, oh, that's a green screen shot or something. Like they did something weird to make that happen. There's not a lot of those. For a movie that does a lot of crazy special effects and one-of-a-kind things and revolutionary things at the time, you're right. It does. So, and a lot of the stuff in the dojo scene is wire work. They don't do as much of the crazy head bobby, blurry, I'm moving so fast you can't see me shit.
The only thing that really took me out was, and it was only for a brief second that I noticed it, but that I noticed it was technology. They do a 360. but they can't complete it in one go. Like I know
Right.
they like, and you could see the cut because it hovered like it's like they got 180 and then it slows for like half a beat and then does the other 180. I'm like, oh, I saw it, I saw it. Like it's
Right.
not. But I mean, given the time, like it's still really good that it's only that like half a beat, and the
Right.
rest of the dojo scene's fine for me. And I get it, like the whole like, oh, Morpheus is fighting Neo. Everybody come take a look,
Mhm.
whatever. For me, what spoke to me about that scene was I really like the body cannot live without the mind,
Mhm.
except there's not a lot of people that are exercising their mind. From this, like, there are people I know that do love this movie that still haven't read a book since they fucking watched this movie.
Right.
And I'm not saying you have to read in order to,
No,
you know,
but like
but like feed your fucking mind, people.
yeah, it's kind of like a
It's
backdoor message in a way.
it,
It's like, yeah.
but like as a person who like carries the banner for like you should fucking read,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
because I do, but because like I want to fucking talk to people about the books. Like it's part of the process. Like
Yeah.
watch a movie, talk about it. Read a book, talk about it.
Mhm.
It's a lot harder with a book, but like the body cannot live without the mind. I feel like it's like that should be plastered everywhere. How is that not the big takeaway?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
everybody else is like, but we're living in a simulation, man. Like it's not real. Like read a fucking book. Like I just
Yeah.
like
At least read a
sorry,
book about VR realities and stuff. Right. Exactly.
yeah.
But now are we past the point where they pull him out?
So they pulled him out. I actually didn't make a note of it because like
Yeah.
I it's I don't know what to make of that scene. Like
Well, which particular part? Because here's
when
the
they
thing. I was going to
pulled
ask
him out,
you.
like when
Yeah, the pods.
when he gets in the pods, yeah,
Mhm.
when he gets
Flushed.
unhooked,
Yeah, he gets
and
unhooked and
flushed.
flushed down the drain.
I like I just kind of watched it. Like
Yeah,
I
sure.
didn't know.
It is a
I know
scene. It is a scene that kind of like it's a jarring kind of scene where all of a sudden it changes gears, and it's like, oh shit, oh, because I think you're supposed to be taken aback at that moment. It's like, oh, this is where he really is. Oh,
I'll
okay,
because the pink goo
yeah,
and the red girl are the most color palette in the entire fucking film.
yes,
And
you're right.
I know the red girl is like supposed to be a thing,
Sure.
but I don't understand why the pink and like the vibrant colors,
Mm.
like why is that the
Only
red
other
girl
thing
side?
necessarily,
Like why is
right.
the only other part of color palette
Mm-hmm.
that part of the movie? And
Right.
that I think that's kind of like I took it all in. It looked like it looked really good, right?
Yeah. And they're definitely doing the thing where, like, when he's in the Matrix, everything's got a kind of a green tint or hue to it, and then when he's in the real world, everything's got a kind of more regular but slightly bluish kind of hint to
Yeah.
it.
But
those are the
so
only
that-
two punches of any other real color, right?
Yeah, and it's I feel like there's a
I think it's a subconscious choice, especially with the woman in the red dress, so that when you finally do get to that scene, it's how we try and guarantee that the audience focuses on her too, so that when he says to Neo, "Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?" that you're supposed to be like, "Oh shit, yeah, I was too," like or yeah, that got my attention, even if you don't really know why. And I think maybe just the color red was just a way for the pods. It's like, well, it's a way to kind of punch up that design and that scene. And
I'm just saying the only other movie that did something anything remotely close to that came out years prior
Mhm.
and is depressing as fuck.
right, I'm sitting here like Schindler's List.
Yeah, I mean it's the
Um,
only other one that's got like that kind of a
The
like
boy with the red
color
balloon?
palette and splashes fucking red.
Yeah, no, you're right. And
And I'm
even-
not trying to draw that comparison.
Sure.
But, like, as a piece of art, looking at, I mean, yeah, it's my first time, and you never get all of it the first time. But
I mean,
like,
I feel like with Schindler's List, it's definitely more of the statement, and here it's more of fucking is manipulating your head.
okay,
That's the
Yeah,
way
I
I kind of think of it.
Yeah.
And I think with the coloring in the pods, it's just kind of like a thing where, like, well, what's going to contrast and look well in the scene? And they just kind of said, well, it's red,
I will say, like, it seems like a hole to me that I'm
Mhm.
sure has been closed and opened many times.
Sure.
Like, Why didn't they kill him? Like, it feels to me like if somebody got unplugged,
Mm-hmm.
the AI would just be like, all right, you get this incinerated. We're not going to flush you. Like, you get incinerated. Like, I would just, like, destroy the pod. Like, it seems like
Right.
why you would let one fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Um,
And because it does leave some questions open too. It's like, well, how does he get unhooked to begin with? Did they hack that? Like, how do they unhook him? And why doesn't the unit that comes over, like you said, to investigate,
just
like,
plug him back in.
plug him back in, knock him out, put him back in, or like you said, kill him, or like that doesn't set off a red flag for them on some level, you know?
Yeah.
And I did find it very convenient that they just flush him down a drain, where for all intents and purposes, like he's alive. Like, you know what I mean? So
They didn't check for vital signs like, oh, is this one dead? Can we flush him?
Right. You know what I mean? Or would they have said, well, if we had left you in the water a little longer, a unit would have came by and, you know, ground you
Whatever.
up for meat uses
I'm
or
not-
something. I mean, that would have been fine. But it also goes to one of these things I think about with the movie too, which is like why even make the virtual reality world for the brains to exist in, right? And like the fix to me for that is I would have put a line of dialogue in there where like, well, you know, the brain activity that you guys generate inside of the matrix generates electricity too. Like it generates, you know, BTUs on its own way by heating up the units where the servers where all this goes on or whatever, you know.
I don't actually think I put it in my notes, but like it brings up the point that Agent Smith makes later on, which is like we made like a perfect world and you guys fucking hated it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I get it. Like,
Sure.
and
they touch on that a little bit.
People. Like, I will say this, Bill, a guy stops you on the street and says, "Here's $100."
Mm-hmm.
Your first reaction is not going to be great. It's going to be like, "What's the catch?"
Sure.
Like there's always the like too good to be true. Like I get it. Like so.
Yeah.
But still, there are. Anyway, I'm not like trying to pick on it, but like I'm just like.
Well, that's what we're doing here. We're kind of having fun with it.
Well,
what I was going to get to with that stuff is that when they take him out, right? I like when the movie follows through on its logic. So, like, they pull him out of the pod, and it's not like, oh, a couple of days goes by, and then we're kind of doing stuff. It's like months go by. Like, he comes out bald as fuck, and like to the point where like his hair is actually growing back. He's got eyebrows back, but they do this whole thing where like his muscles have atrophied, and you know, he says to him, he goes, well, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And Morpheus like, "Well, you've never used them before." You know, and it's this whole thing of like, yeah, well, logic would dictate that, like, you know, you have to kind of do that. And there's other examples of it in this movie where it's like, well, they've set up the world, and as much as a bitch as it might be, like as a creator, like, well, you painted yourself into a corner. You do have to address some of this shit. You know what I mean? And I was glad once again to kind of see that thing happening where it's like in another movie that would have got cut out for time, or you know.
Well, this is we didn't talk about it. It's like 212 or something. Like it's a long movie.
I was surprised when I saw the running time.
I didn't realize because it was my first question was like, all right, how long is this? Because the 90s had some great long movies, and you know, say what you want about Titanic, but it was one of those that's longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even Armageddon's not like a clip, like a quick 90.
Sure.
Like up until the mid 90s, big movies were that formulaic 87, 89, 90 minutes. You were going to get in and out in an hour and a half and you were done.
Yeah.
And then they started getting longer. Like, and in fairness, and I am a guy who hates the Nolan Batman trilogy because it's all three of them are super long. If you take that entire trilogy and cut 2 hours from all three movies and make like a 90-minute movie from each of them, I will probably like them all.
They have a slow pace too, so they feel a little longer. Yeah.
I sit through them and I go, I'm actually looking at my watch, whereas Endgame was 2.5 hours. I didn't look at my watch once. Part of that's pacing. I get it. They're not the same movies, but all I'm saying is I can sit through a long movie without feeling it's long. This was one of those. Like I never at any point was like, oh shit, like where are we?
Yeah, they keep it moving. In the Batman Nolan stuff especially, like there's these long kind of camera shots. The soundtrack is kind of slow and methodical. It's really like this whole let's just build up tension and keep it there kind of thing. Whereas this is a little bit more classic of it's supposed to be an action adventure at its core. Let's keep it moving. We have a lot of stuff a lot of ground to cover, a lot of ideas. We don't have time really to kind of stand around. We've got to be explaining stuff or doing stuff. We can't just be standing on the rooftop looking longingly over the city. That's, maybe we can do that in the sequels.
So next up we have a turncoat. Ooh. And the visit to the Oracle, which I feel like are two pieces that kind of like that's the I feel like those two things together in the 15 minutes that they happen is more of the turn of the movie than him taking the pill and getting out.
Yeah.
Like, am I like
I feel like that's kind of like the beginning part of the second act kind of thing where it's like we've met him, he's in the world, we've seen what the threat is, which is at the 1 hour mark. I like to always check what happens at the 1 hour mark. It's always a pivotal scene of some kind. It's usually like when a story takes a turn or changes or something important happens that's an establishing thing. And for this movie, it's when the tentacle bots come down and it's like we got to do the EMP, are we going to do the EMP bolts, and they manage to kind of like be quiet enough and they go away, like, you know what I mean? But we learn what the outside threat is to them, like, and but it's definitely a thing where right, it's setting up Cypher for the next part of the movie and Oracle laying the groundwork for where his head has to be, for all this to kind of play out in the right way.
Now, how do you? There's two questions I had for you. One was, how do you feel about Oracle telling people what they need to hear?
Right.
And like, am I missing something? Like she said, eat the cookie, you'll feel right as rain. And I was like, oh my God, the cookie's the blue pill. Like that's like, am I like
don't eat anything.
Like the way she set it up and was like, have a cookie, you'll feel better. Like I was like, that cookie's the blue pill. Don't take it. It's going to undo everything they've done for you.
On the rewatch, it does. Yeah, I kind of was thinking a lot about it too. And it does feel like a thing in the moment, like, oh, is this going to like wipe his memory of everything that just happened here? And I don't think it does. I think it's just like a pot cookie or something, or a CBD cookie. And it's just meant to mellow him out. Hey, don't worry about it too much so that maybe he doesn't overthink it, because I would think that too. Because you ever have that thought that's like, oh, now that I thought, that thing's not going to happen, like just because I thought it. But now that I thought it and it won't happen, it could happen. Like, where it's like that, you have those thought patterns where they constantly cancel each other out, but because it cancels it out, it should be good now, this kind of stuff. So, like, hey, don't think too much about the paradox nature of the stuff I'm telling you.
But the cookie, and I was also waiting for like this is good. Like he never commented on the fucking, like I don't know why, but like it's such a there's such an an indirect arrow pointing to the cookie during that entire fucking scene, and there's no bullet to that. Like and it seems like
he should at least make it like a little face, like a little eyebrow raise, like when he bites it, like, not bad.
Yeah.
But I did notice a continuity error real small, that when he comes out of the room and Morpheus is there, the cookie already has the bite. And then when he goes to eat the cookie, it's a whole cookie. But it seems like it's the same size bite. So they might have had him reset and do it again. And then it just, like, so it's not like, oh, there's a big, perfectly comical cookie commercial shaped bite. It looks like the same, like he only took like a small nibble off the top and then like it reset, and then I was like, oh, okay, I'm probably paying too much attention now to the whole thing. But at
the same time, like you have to eat that cookie, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I mean, the Oracle, like however they built her up, like you can't
and I'm thinking at the very least you're standing there and she's making cookies. You're smelling fresh baked cookies the whole time. Of course you're going to eat the fucking cookies.
Yeah.
Like, what I mean? Is it like it's oatmeal raisin? Okay, I'll eat it anyway.
So
Fresh made cookies, damn it. Even if you don't like that kind, you're gonna eat it.
so my notes are slightly out of order.
Yeah, hit it though.
Um,
Well, I was gonna ask you because I think you're moving on, but Oracle does a palm reading for him.
well, we're not there yet. I
Okay,
want to
fair
go
enough.
back
Okay.
before that, and I think it's before that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrote, I can only show you the door, Neo. Which again,
Right.
it's a hit over the head. Morpheus says that
Mm.
more than once, and it's not like in passing. It's like the music swells and it's silence, and you just hear Morpheus say, "I can only show you to the door, Neo." Like
You have to walk through.
yeah, like and it's like, okay, all right,
It's
like
more heavy metaphoring. It's a lot of that
and
with him. Yeah.
there's a part of me at this point in the film that I'm like, were we dumber in the 90s? Like, I don't understand, like, why. Like, I don't get it. Like, because one of the things that I go to immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and I only go to it now, but in the moment, I was, like, trying to come up with things. Fight Club also came out the same year.
Sure.
Fight Club does not beat you over the head with fucking anything unless you
No.
rewatch it for the 100th time and you start piecing the little tiny things together.
Well, because
but-
the real deal that's going on in Fight Club though is a secret. It's a big reveal at the end. You know.
I get that, and the Sixth Sense is the same way, and I know
Yeah.
some people were called it early, whatever, in the theater.
Sure.
Like, but I just get the feeling like they were secrets, but none of it was beaten over the head. I feel like while the Matrix is not a secret necessarily, like they're trying to tell him, like
he
some
is
of these
constantly
things
talking about it in this overly grandiose kind of
yeah,
way.
like what
Yeah.
and also maybe this is something covered in 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Is Morpheus going to become like president? Like, I don't understand what he has to gain. But I don't come to it because of
It's-
anything other than he's talking about it. So nobody, like a resistance fighter, like I look at Luke in Star Wars, right? We're going to get those guys, but it's not like one day, like you know what I mean? Like he
Well,
doesn't.
it's funny you kind of mention that stuff because there is a scene in I think it's 2, where like he makes a big speech in front of a lot of people, you know, and although he's not like the leader, you know what I mean? He is a top dog in the resistance, and so he gets to make this kind of like real grand speech kind of thing, you know, and and it's like so now I wonder what your reaction will be when you finally get to that scene. You're like, maybe he is running for office. I can't
Yeah,
tell.
because it just seems like there'd be no other reason to make it that grandiose. Like,
Yeah.
otherwise, you'd just be like, we want to kill these fucking Agent Smith guys. Like,
It would have been nice if Cypher, at least at some point, the cynical one, was like, yeah, he's such a drama queen. Like, you know, just kind of taking it down a little bit, you know. But yeah, I
So-
did kind of notice at a halfway point, like he's still kind of, although he's not talking like it's a secret, he's kind of behaving like, oh man, this is the grandest, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I guess you're just pomp and circumstance at all times, you know.
but you were talking about the palm reading.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask you if you've ever had your palm read. I haven't.
I might have,
Right.
but I don't fucking remember it.
Mm,
Um,
okay. But it seems like something that might have happened at a fair or something, I guess.
It seems so. We'll do a 2-minute tangent with Agent Palmer.
Oof.
I was in charge of student activities for 2.5 years when I was in college on campus.
Okay.
And sometimes there would be like a palm reader or a caricaturist or whatever that nobody would like, whatever,
No
like
one
that's
would
what
give
they
a-
decided. No one would go to. So somebody has to be the first one. And I'm sure a palm reader was one of them. And I was like, here, read my palm. But I wouldn't pay, like, I don't care. Like, I wouldn't have paid attention. I was just trying to see, like, all right, somebody else will do this now that they've seen somebody do this. But I don't think I ever, like, paid attention
Sure.
at all.
I think what would be great right now is if you had a flashback to her reading your palm and she said, you want me to read your palmer? And you were like, what? And she's like, no, nothing, never mind. Much like how the Oracle is like, not too bright though.
No.
You know?
I do like that being the one is like being in love. I feel like that's like the one line
Mm.
that really worked for me from her. Like, of all the shit she said, that's the one that made the most sense to me. Like, you'll know it when you know it, but you can't be told about it ahead of time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was a good analogy. It was a pretty solid kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's conversely, it's like the thing to say about bad art. I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. You know what I mean?
There you go.
But
Yep.
I did think the whole exchange when they first meet, and she's like, he knocks the vase over. Well, she says, "Don't
Would
worry
you have
about the
knocked it over?
vase." She says, "Don't worry about the vase." He knocks it over, and he was like, "Oh, sorry about that." She's like, "Oh, what's going to kill you later is if thinking about whether or not if I hadn't said anything, if you'd still have knocked it over."
Yeah. Yeah.
And but
Well, that goes to my next
okay.
notes. She's talking about who dies,
Mm,
and this pivotal moment, and I just keep thinking, what's real and does it matter? Like
mhm.
the one thing that I don't quite understand, and it gets revealed to us about like the environmental devastation that we wrought
Sure.
on upon the planet. And the humans are a virus to Earth.
Virus.
But the one thing I don't understand is what's the relevance of us caring? Like what's real and what does it matter? And I don't know if it's a point that ever gets mentioned to my satisfaction. Like I get why the Matrix was created
Mhm.
and who created it and why there would be a resistance, but then Cypher has this whole like I'd be better off there, and it's like why does it does it matter? And what's the relevance of if something's real or not?
Well, I think that's kind of like what Morpheus is talking about when he's talking to him about what's real, like before he gives him the pills, and he's like, you know, what is real? Does anything matter? Is anything real? So elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by what does it matter?
So Cypher's the crazy one,
Right.
so to speak, like he's portrayed as that
Oh,
because he
okay.
wants to go back into the Matrix.
I got you.
But why
Why wouldn't
who's
that be
one
a relevant
or
idea to want? Like, why wouldn't
yeah,
that be
like
understandable for someone to be like, oh, like life is just better in there. Like it's
yeah.
like yeah, I hear you. It's like who's to say what's better one versus the other, and that because this is the real world, then we should just automatically accept that. Yeah, this is the right place. This is it's been taken away.
So it's legit a reverse of Ready Player One, right? Whereas Ready Player One, we've decimated the Earth and everybody wants to be in the simulation.
Right.
Like, and
Yeah.
I
And
like,
now here it's like when people get pulled out, it's like, you know, yeah, the real world sucks, but it's better than being a slave and not knowing.
yeah. So like, I
It's a
guess,
fair point there in a way. You know,
and
it's
it's that they never come back to it. Like
mm,
as a person viewing the movie, it's just
yeah.
that Cypher's a little unhinged and that he's turning his people in to go back means that like, oh, like reality is so much better when it probably isn't. Like
Yeah, right,
in all
exactly.
real, if all of us had the choice, I think
So if you
ignoring red pill, blue pill, I
so
think
if
most of us would choose simulation.
so you're saying that if you were in a hot topic in 1999 or in 2000, 2001 and you saw a t-shirt that said Cypher was right, you might have bought it. Or
I would
Cypher had a point.
I would shake the hand of whoever was wearing it. I probably wouldn't buy it.
I wouldn't buy it, but I'd be like, hey, I agree. This guy wasn't far from wrong, and he
Thumbs up
does
to
have
the
a
guy with
point.
the bumper sticker in front of me. You know?
He does have a point. The thing is, he has to sell out all his friends to get back in, and I think that's the thing, right? I mean, because when you think about it, it's like, yeah, they can pull you out somehow, but getting you back into a pod, that's something only the hive can
Yeah.
do for you, whatever the actual matrix runners. So if you're out, you're fucked. You're out, and then the only way to get back in is to fucking sell out all your friends, quote unquote. But he loves the taste of a good steak, and
It does.
he's not far from wrong, you know, and much to his chagrin, the deal doesn't work out very well for him.
That's true.
it does kind of
This-
go bust. Like he could,
Let
go ahead.
that's a good segue to something that else that's busted.
Mhm.
I know I'm jumping very far ahead,
Okay.
but Agent Smith, when Neo shows up in a helicopter, says no in a way that immediately took me back to the redub of Vader saying no, because I was like, that no doesn't belong.
No.
Like like there's just like when Agent Smith says it, I'm like, that doesn't belong. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because the Vader one is so ingrained in me as like you shouldn't be saying that, and maybe it's because tonally it sounds exactly the same as the overdub from Star Wars.
It kind of
but
does. Yeah.
in that moment, I'm like, you don't need to say that.
Don't say it like that. Yeah. Well, here's the thing too. Hugo Weaving. We could talk about this for a second. Hugo Weaving is doing a very enunciated type of talking to Mr. Anderson.
Hugo Weaving is doing his best Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin as Hugo Weaving in this fucking movie. Because there's a part of me I know that's Hugo Weaving, but he sounds like he's delivering his lines like Ben Kingsley as the Mandarin, and that's not what's going on here.
It is. Well, to be honest with you, I think Ben Kingsley stole it from Hugo. But it is a thing where it's very pronounced and deliberate. And I get what he's kind of doing. I guess he's internalizing the idea that if a computer kind of was perfect and exact, it would speak perfectly and exactly, But he's a man of wants. We come to learn in time with Mr. Agent Smith. But I will say on the rewatch, I found my favorite line, and it comes from the Oracle, and it's balls to bones. From she says to him something to the effect of like, it's just not in you, like, or whatever. It's like balls to bones. It's just not, it's just, and it's like it's a phrase like top to bottom, and I just never heard it before. And I'm sure it's one of those things where like, if I had been raised in Chicago or someplace else or whatever, it's probably like a colloquialism I just never came across. But I'm like, it's going to be in my vernacular now. It's just
don't think about this, Bill. There are houses where people have 3-year-olds, and the parents were so enamored with the Matrix that those 3-year-olds are saying that all the time right now.
They're probably named Neo.
It's definitely a better name than any name from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, a lot of those names in Game of Thrones, like I saw an article about that, how it's like...
Yeah, so did I.
Like all those people who named their daughter Daenerys, you know what I mean? Or whatever names, and they all turn bad. Cersei.
I was going to say, that's taking... So, okay, side tangent. The Game of Thrones thing, and I'm not a person who watches, but...
We are recording this with 1 week to go before the last episode.
But people that named their kid before the end of season 1 even should have known, like, oh fuck, never name anybody anything's game, right?
Yeah.
And then Neo, same thing. Like, when this movie came out, if you were having a kid and you're like, let's name our kid Neo, great. And then they were like, we're gonna make a sequel. And I have no idea what happened in 2, 3, or the whatever, but like, you got to be worried about like what happens. Like if your kid, like, you know what I mean? Like if Neo comes out to be like super bad guy in number 2, like, oh shit, you can't take that back.
Yeah.
You called him, like,
right.
So
I mean, I don't think this is the franchise where that would have happened. But on a long form TV show where it's all about the twists and turns, you should have been more. People should have been more careful. It is a lesson to be learned, and also too, like, it's as unique as that name is, and will be unique probably down the line, because when that kid gets older, other kids aren't going to get the reference probably.
Ooh, I didn't think of that. Same with Game of Thrones, though. Like, what are they
Right.
going to watch it? Like, we watch Hogan. Like, I will admit, I'm an old man. I watch Hogan's Heroes every once in a while.
Mhm.
But like, is Game of Thrones going to be on like Me TV in 20 years, like 30 years?
I can't believe
Like,
that's where you
Hogan's
went.
Heroes is like what?
Yeah,
Like,
one day, yeah, it'll be in syndication. It'll be on like Channel 9. It'll have all the cool stuff cut down. It'll have
it'll
commercial
be a
breaks.
half hour.
Yeah, it'll be like Sopranos on A&E. You'll just hate it. But yeah, I was thinking about how like it wouldn't matter if the other kids knew the reference or not, because little kids will just make fun of your name for being
Anyway.
different. Like, you know, it actually doesn't even have to be different. It's just like, you know, if your name can rhyme with something, you're doomed. That's what
Yeah.
that's kind of what it comes down to. So what's next on your little crib notes?
I just know the path, and knowing the path and walking the path are two very different things. And I feel like that could literally be the indecisive podcast that you and I do about making podcasts.
Knowing
Because-
the path versus walking the path.
Yeah. I mean, that's
It's almost semantical too. Like when he said it, I was kind of like, yeah, there's a difference, but I think it's like a real fine line, especially when
Yeah.
you're using it as a metaphor. It's like,
yeah, it doesn't work as a metaphor. It only works as like that's the road, but driving on it, like,
Yeah.
okay, I get it. But like knowing the path and walking the path, when you're talking metaphorically, knowing the path is just as metaphorical as walking it. Like
right.
now we're meant
Like it's like one of those
2
things you should
plus
say.
2 is 4 and
Right.
3 plus 1 is 4.
I think it's a
and
thing.
don't you forget it.
Right.
Like what?
I think it's a thing should be said more likely after a thing. Like, you know, it's a lesson. It's not a. It's a lesson after the fact.
Not
that sticks
before.
better than before, because at least after the fact you can go, oh, right, like I thought I knew what this was going to be, but now here I am. And I think that's actually what he's saying too. Like, well, this is, you know, I told you what the path was going to be. I kind of told you it was going to be a challenge. Here we are. Yeah, it's a challenge. You know.
And then the only other thing I've got is something that I feel like is a criticism for almost every movie ever made, and that is that in the last 20 minutes of the film, nothing surprised me. It all seemed
like where it was going to
predictable
go.
and formulaic, except that because I was invested, I didn't really care that I knew where it was going. I just
Right.
wanted to see it through. And I feel like that's what a good movie can do. Like
Mhm.
set it up, crazy twists and turns. I don't care if I know what it is, I'm invested.
Sure.
If I hadn't been invested, I would have been like, oh, is he really going to save her? Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't watching it like that. Like,
Right.
I was, like, oh,
I
it's
think
just-
here's the thing too. It's like, you know, we've told you repeatedly he's going to be the one. So, like, yeah, you get to see him being the one. But I think what's supposed to kind of blow your mind or be cool, especially at the time this came out, is how that happens, right? And like the way it kind of unfolds. So, like,
And I get that the bullet, like the fact that he wasn't fast enough for all of them is well, he might be the one, but he's still kind of human or whatever. It's a
Yeah.
humanizing factor because in this world run by AI,
mhm.
we can't make him completely perfect, otherwise he'd be a robot and it would defeat the purpose of having a human whatever.
Right. So let me ask you this then. So,
Yeah.
because there are some big scenes and big moments in it that are iconic kind of moments. So, the building raid when they go to get Morpheus
Yes.
and they walk into the building lobby, the lobby scene,
Yeah.
which is like a much kind of like ballyhooed, if that's the right word for this, kind of scene where, like, you know, everybody kind of talks about, especially at that time, because I think it was a thing where it was like, oh, we just kind of hadn't seen that much kung fu, wire work, action stuff that's like, you know, done like that, set to slow motion and a soundtrack, and it's like over the top stuff in a world where, like, oh, it's not just like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Let's just
Yeah.
say, even though it comes out after, I think is a thing that's like supposed to take place in the real world. So when you see them do kind of outrageous stuff, it's like, oh, that's kind of crazy. That's over the top. But in the setup is that since it's a fake world where these characters can kind of bend some of the limits of what a person can do, them doing crazy cartwheels and running longs on the wall is more like this is a spectacle. Like, how did
It's
any of that hit you?
it I really liked it. It's a very good marriage of the two things. Like, I mean,
Yeah, my chair just dropped. I'm sorry. I was quite surprised at how gentle I touched the handle.
so you and I have watched Preacher.
Sure.
And people talk about whatever kung fu movie they like or action adventure movie, but putting it all together in a very nice cinematography way.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of like covers all the bases. Like,
Right.
I can understand why people would talk about it. I find it very interesting that as far as major blockbusters are concerned, the only person to use more bullets than Neo is John Wick. Like, I find, like, because
it's a little
there's
ironic.
that,
Yeah.
like, there are scenes, like, I know we're not quite there, but like,
But hey, look,
he's
John Wick uses less ammunition, I would say, than
no,
Neo.
but the people shooting at him do not.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Um,
John Wick is all headshots. It's just two to the head, two to the head,
what-
two to the
like,
head.
Outside of John Wick, I can't think of a movie where I saw multiple scenes where we look at the empty shells in slow mo more than once. Like in a because it happens, that hallway scene. You
Yeah.
see it when they're unloading clips,
Mhm.
and then again from the helicopter,
Right.
and it's like, all right, wait, what's going on? Like, this is like, it's cool, but
Yeah.
it's like it's I feel like John Wick is now kind of up to the game on that. So
Sure.
this seemed a bit tame to me. Like, if I
Yeah.
hadn't seen John Wick, this
Mhm.
would have been like a little bit more mind blowing.
Sure. Sure.
It's probably one of the few things that was like, whoa. But like that it adds that extra level. Like, John Wick doesn't do the crazy stuff. It's not the walls. Like, it's
Yeah.
improbable, but it's still grounded. And here, I will say, I was only slightly disappointed in that like
Mhm.
entry scene, because they set up the movie so we know they can hack the system, and that's all they're doing. Like, they're only
Right.
running in walls and shit. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, I get it. Like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why they didn't go crazier. Like, was it just a scenario where like the director was like, we don't have that much money?
Yeah, I
Or
think
like,
it's a
we
little
only
bit of
have
that.
so many wires? But like,
Yeah.
I feel like they spent so much time getting us to that point. Like, they should have been like, he should have jumped up and done like a gymnast in slow motion,
Mhm.
like when they do on the pommel horse and they hit the hands they go up and they spin like 12 times.
Mhm.
But like, he should be doing headshots or
Yeah.
spraying bullets.
Well, I
Like,
will say, like in defense of the writers, that he is not quite there yet. Like he's at that place by the end of the movie. But
That's fair.
you know what I mean? But I think even
when they walk
Trinity
in that building,
I
it's
think
not-
even Trinity gives him a look, like when they finish in the lobby and are about to get on the elevator. Like, it's not like you can really read her expression, but she does kind of look over at him, and I kind of take it as a like, because she often doesn't show what she's thinking. Like, that's her thing. She's trying to maintain like this complete
stoic, the
stoic and flat thing that's a false facade. Like, the wheels are turning in her head for sure. And so in my head, I kind of take that as she's kind of like this guy really is pretty fucking good. He probably she's definitely turned on. Like, that might be where she fell in love. Like, if you have to backtrack the moment, because it seems like later on, like, oh, you're in love with him. That was pretty quick. But like, that might be like the moment where she's like,
oh no, come
she's
on.
convinced.
She was in love. She was in love with him from the moment she took him the first dinner.
Right.
You never brought me dinner.
Fucking Cypher. All right, so to follow through with the idea of like he hadn't gotten there yet. So when
Yeah.
you really see him get there is the subway fight scene, right?
Yeah.
So it's all this going on. You mentioned that he gets shot and stuff. But before that moment, or actually after that, is when he really makes the breakthrough. So we can talk quickly about like the subway fight goes down. He gets shot, and he comes back to life. Like he just gets resurrected basically. And a lot of people often in these articles or things will refer to this as the Christ moment, or the because anytime a character gets resurrected for no good reason or just apropos of nothing, they just start breathing again. That's always like the
I
thing people
just
have to reference is that
I
it's this
I literally
Christ-like moment, and it's like really, it's not quite Christ-like.
I didn't see it Christ like at all. To be fair, I
Mm,
thought that was like he was at the very beginning of this movie. He's a fucking hacker, and I just feel like that's him. Like, oh, he hacked the system. He doesn't need to like
yeah,
because here it goes back to the body cannot live without the mind.
right.
Well, but the mind can live without the fucking body.
Right, and that's a
At
thing
least
that, and that's the thing I wonder about the whole. You can, if you die there, you die here. But if you transcend the Matrix in the
Yeah.
way that he is supposed to, when like Morpheus, kind of like does the whole foreshadow of, oh, so you're telling me I can dodge bullets? Well, I'm telling you that in time you don't have to, and then does that. Then
Yeah.
it's like, well, I know this thing so much that I'm in it. As long as I don't forget that I'm in it, and
I'm
that
fine.
it's fake.
Yeah.
Like it should be like a dream where like I know the rules. The rules don't really apply to me unless I think they apply to me. You know, what I mean, mind over
Yeah.
matter thing, and that's why I think the gunshot thing happens to him at all is because like it's a surprise moment for him. He gets hit with the first one and he stumbles back, and then he gets shot more. So that's the kind of way I play it in my head of like, well, why does that even like
Yeah.
how does he
And
miss it? It's just a surprise luck shot, you know?
yeah, versus they're not real bullets.
Well, there's that too. Like his mind over matter should tell him that like as he's laying there dying, like one of the things that kind of should happen is that all of a sudden the bullets just kind of push out from him and clink clink
I
clink clink
was
clink on the floor, you know?
I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
Um I was also waiting for and so this is another scenario where this movie is helped by watching it at the time
Sure.
because there's a moment when like he freezes all the bullets in front of him.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, we've seen this in superhero movies before. So are they going to fall down or is he going to shoot them back at him?
Right,
Like,
right.
Because it's like, I've seen it before now. Like
Yeah.
the X-Men franchise has done that, I think, 30 times. Like,
Right.
it's just
Where
one of
either
those
it's
things.
because you're magnetism or you slow down time.
Yep.
So it's not as like interesting a visual or compelling or convincing anymore, maybe. So that's an
It's
interesting
just,
thing. Whereas
it's not,
Mhm.
I wouldn't say it's not an interesting visual.
Right.
It's just not shocking because it's one of the rare occurrences where like I can tell you now
Mm-hmm.
that becomes humdrum. Like
Sure.
that's nothing special in
And
2019.
I think in this scene, it's really supposed to make you remember that that's what Morpheus said. And it's another one of these moments in here where it's like, oh, he's unlocking it right now. And, that's where it's supposed to resonate with you. Besides being like a really cool moment or like a really kind of crazy, iconic imagery, it's supposed to be this thing where like, this is like just another aspect of how he's going to be breaking all the laws right now. And so that when we get to the whole thing where like he's blocking all of his super fast moves with just the one arm and he turns to the side, like basically he might as well yawn. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, I just fucking, I'll just block all these shots. That he's fucking transcending. And then the leap into him, into Agent Smith, which is a thing I hadn't really thought so much about, but it is the thing of where like, she says to him earlier on in the movie, oh, from the rooftop when he does the lean back, that, oh, how did you do that? And he's like, do what? She's like, you moved just like them. And he's like, I don't know. I'm Keanu. I'm just here. That this is another example of that where like he can operate in the system not only like they do, but better than they do. So much like they jump into people and take over their bodies, he just says, fuck it, let me see what happens. Because I just think this might work. And dives into Smith, which is like a weird thing for a moment. I remember watching it the first time and I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, okay, all right, I guess it's how it works here. And I didn't really kind of put it all together that, well, it's just another reflection of him having this new set of skills and also probably internally being like, rules don't apply to me really. I'm going to do whatever I want. including fly away at the end.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the bullets specifically because the visual on their, I don't know, kinetic trail is the only thing I can come up with.
Sure.
Is a very video game thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was a video game thing in the 90s too. Like that wasn't, it was unique for movies, but like we see trails on bullets in video games since the early 90s.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the way that was done? Because it wasn't like a trail, right? Like it's a kinetic, like
kinda
you
like
see the energy
wave.
as it pulled. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it worked for me at the time. It didn't really make me feel anything other than like I felt more like it was supposed to be like how the air moves or shifts out of the way, kind of a thing, as opposed to like, you know, just having it be like a streak because it's like a motion blur thing, and we're frozen in time or something. Whereas like, you know, it's a little bit of that. I think it's a kind of like in their head, it's a little bit of like, you know, he's moving so fast that he's seeing things in a slower frame rate than us. But meanwhile, he is stopping them. So,
yeah,
I don't know. I think it might have just been this thing that they kind of added to help sell the visual a little bit.
It's possible. I mean, it works.
Because I don't know how much you see that in the sequels and stuff. If it becomes like an aesthetic thing where it's like, well, we've established that that's a thing we do in these movies, so we continue to do it. It's part of our look.
So I'm gonna ask you what a dangerous question, but I feel like it's totally worth it.
Go for it.
I like this film.
Nice. Okay.
Am I gonna like it more or less if I watch the second and third?
Well, here's the thing. I think like it depends on how much like I would say like if you really liked it and you have some like kind of like unanswered questions and like of like learning a little bit more about the world or seeing some of the world building, I would say watch the sequels. I would say just watch the sequels like if you enjoyed this and just want to see like what other cool shit they might do in this world with the fighting and with this over the top like when you were mentioning how like, oh, he should have been doing like crazier stuff.
Yeah.
Like the crazier stuff happens in 2 and 3.
Okay.
But I will say that like you're right. Like the implication here of like what he can do in this world. I mean, he fucking flies away at the end. Like, you know, he basically could be Superman if he wanted to. And it seems like that skill set would kind of nullify every single fight he would ever have really quickly. And so to have long drawn out sequences almost like kind of like defies the logic you've established. But I mean, it is kind of like some crazy over the top stuff that's probably worth checking out. Like the freeway stuff that's in part 2. Like I think Love It or Hate It is just technically, and for you know those reasons, like really a thing to behold. I'll say if you're just looking for like a little bit more story fill, a little bit more world building, like how did we get here? The Animatrix is great for that because it's very encyclopedic in a way where it's like we're just going to tell you the history.
Is there a reason like fans of the first film are so divided? Like we didn't really get into this so much, but like one of the things I knew about The Matrix beforehand was that one was great and everybody's divided on everything else.
It's
like
funny. You told me that, and I repeated it to our buddy Ed, and he was like, "No, that sounds about right. Like one is great. Everybody kind of like loves one. People are mixed on 2, and some people feel like 3 kind of brings it back around.
And most people love the Animatrix."
Right.
And I don't understand how this became such a thing. Like granted, I didn't see the first one, so I wasn't going to go run out to the second or third.
But I think at the time, the end of the first one, it's one of those few movies that, at least at that time, because a lot of it just felt so new and fresh, at least in presentation, even if it was all kinds of like some levels of regurgitated ideas, that you kind of walked away from that being like, oh man, like this just got fucking started. Like shit, like because it's like, you know, this whole movie's like you're gonna be the one, then he gets to be the one, and it's like it's over. You know,
I will say
because it does leave on that cliffhanger of like I'm coming for you guys next, and it's like, wow, what is he gonna do now? He can do anything.
See, and
you know?
I feel like it's
and so part part two kind of like for some people I think comes a little shy of like this
Okay.
expectations that like people probably had of where it was going to go. Like, you know?
See, and I look at it like I look at it very differently.
Sure.
I look at it like here's this mind-blowing movie with all these new concepts or old concepts that we threw together and to make a new brew. And then he becomes the one and it ends, and this is where you and your friends are supposed to go to the fucking diner and just
Yeah.
talk for the next couple hours. Like that's
Sure. And I feel like a lot of that happened. Yeah.
and I feel like one of the reasons that sequel culture fails a lot of the time is because there are even a bad movie that makes a couple $100 million, and now that's a bad movie on opening weekend.
It's a crazy sentence, yeah, but go
on. Has just a million conversations after it talking about a million even if
Right.
if a third of everybody agrees, it's 300,000 different sequel possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, how can any sequel and sequel culture ever live up to that? Because like what you and I discussed is one thing, but you and I don't have to agree on it. So that's 3 sequel ideas between the two of us.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
right. It's your ideas, my ideas versus what
So-
will actually happen or somebody. Yeah. No, yeah. And that's a thing that is, especially nowadays, where, like, there was a point in history where sequels almost always sucked. The mold started to get broken in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, where some sequels started to be really good, sometimes even better. But that was the rare thing, right? With like a sequel that kind of like, took the ball, ran with it, and was just as good, if not better, or, worthy. But it was like the first time like I saw people kind of get, pretty divisive, kind of like on a movie. And I think it was like that movie really raised the expectations. I think it opened up, like probably Star Wars at the time.
well,
It was one of those movies that left it open enough, and it was such an unusual thing that it made a lot of people's minds wander and race when they left the theater. Like, what could happen next? Where could it go?
And I don't disagree. I think the one thing that makes Star Wars, Indiana Jones, like some of these things, when something like Indiana Jones, where it was gonna be a serial, like they envisioned it as a serial,
Right.
then you don't really have that issue of what do we do next? We just do a new adventure.
Yeah.
And something like Star Wars that was a trilogy from the beginning, you don't have that falter because you're pointing it in a direction when you end one, so you can point it in the direction that takes you to 2. It's when you get those sequels that's like, oh, hey, 2 years later, we've just announced we're doing a sequel to whatever and whatever 2.
Right.
Like, wait, what?
Well,
you didn't set up number 1.
Right.
You didn't have it in mind as anything other than we're doing this movie.
And I think the thing to maybe take away from all that is that this was kind of, I think, was envisioned as a trilogy from Jump Street, kind of.
Okay, that was going to be my...
But that I don't know how crystallized those ideas for 2 and 3 were as much as how 1 was. I feel like 1 was a thing they were kicking around for a long time and refined and polished and polished and polished.
Well, it's what's the first album? Curse.
Right, exactly.
How long did it take you to write your first album that was fucking double platinum? Oh, it took me 20 years. How long did it take you to write your shitty second album? One year.
Yeah, this is why some people feel like, people who put out less material less often put out better material per pound because it tends, you know what I mean? But what I was getting to is that shit, I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. For those of you paying attention, Bill with his weekly podcast that is no longer, and me with my weekly blog, what Bill is saying is we should do less content. Because
there was no coded message in that. I mean, infer what you want.
I'm just having.
But that's what I was going to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
Was that I think the thing with a thing like Star Wars or The Matrix, as opposed to maybe something else like Die Hard or Indiana Jones, is that there's a lot of world building going on. And in Star Wars, you get to see a lot of it. All of the, you know all of the things that you need to know for that world to really work. Matrix ends with some mystery kind of still there. Like they mentioned Zion, but you never see Zion. And you kind of know that the robots are in charge, but like, is it just the robots? And like, how does that work? And so when the movie starts to, the sequels start to like answer questions that are like the unintended mystery questions, but they're just things they haven't gotten to or revealed yet. They're not like being held out like a J.J. Abrams, like, oh, it's a mystery box. But they're just kind of like, oh, that was chapter 1. We're going to cover that stuff in chapter 2 and 3. That I think some of those reveals then for people's imaginations didn't like line up. I think with Star Wars, they set up the world, they introduce you to the world, so now you just want to know about the story. Like,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Where does the story
gotcha.
go?
Yeah.
And so you can argue, I'm sure people did at the time, probably, it's hard to imagine that anybody gave like Empire Strikes Back a hard time, but I guarantee you it happened at the time. Like people, it was fans that at the time, they were just like, man, I don't know about that Chewbacca guy, or whatever, you know? How does everybody understand Chewbacca? I don't understand. How does everybody understand R2-D2? Nobody talks in beeps and boops. But my point being that, like, you know,
Bill, I want to tell you that everybody listening to this podcast right now is upset that you didn't go into your specific voice when you did that complaint.
I didn't do my Chewbacca or something.
No, you didn't do your basement comic book geek.
Oh, it's too late now. Now it'll be just too on the nose. But
Yeah, because it's this whole fucking conversation we've been having for the last 15 minutes. I didn't mean to go down this road, but it's something that, like,
excuse me, sir. I was trying to make a point, sir. Excuse me. That these worlds are so large and unwieldy that sometimes it's too much for some people's small brains to fathom. So that's kind of like my point, is that I feel like, you know, so it's easier to kind of like, if you have like the mystery thing there too, that, not that it's like an inherent mystery to it, but it does feel like there are unanswered kind of questions there. Whereas with Star Wars, you don't have unanswered questions except for, oh, what happens next to these people? So in part 2 of Matrix, if you're unhappy with kind of like what happens with some of the characters and where some of that story goes, and you're also kind of like not impressed by what these other things we didn't get to see are when you finally get to see them, then I think for some people that'll add up to being like a less than satisfactory night at the movies. And I think also too, by the time the sequel came out, we were really starting to get into the era of the internet where it was like,
I can talk this to death in 3 hours after I see it.
right, and I can go on a message board, I can pick it apart forever, and it was, you know, the very early rise of fandoms really getting a recognized voice by the rest of media, where it was like, oh, some people are unhappy, and, you know, it's like, well, where are you hearing that from? If you're reporting it, it's like, oh, it's all over. That's what people on the message boards, you know, the message board era. You know, there's people on the message boards are saying, I don't know, I liked it, but I think it was around that time where, you know, it started to kind of creep in where, like, you know, everybody had that global voice more, so you got to hear more from the dissenters or the people that were unhappy. So I think it probably gets a bad rap, maybe, that like, oh, a large number of people didn't like it, but I just think that the vocal level of people who don't like a thing started to become a thing that we could hear more. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the one person that didn't like it is always going to be louder than the 8 that liked it and the 1 that loved it.
Well, it used to be that those people who didn't like it really didn't have a volume button. And now, thanks to the internet, they kind of do. So,
and everybody loves to hit up the volume on hate.
Well, you know what it is too?
Dislike,
I say it all the time too. It's easier to, you feel more like you have to get it out when you're angry. And I think that's a thing about internet hate culture in a way, or just what happens with a project or a thing that gets like kind of like, oh, it seems like it's getting really crapped on. Is just that like it just comes when you're annoyed by something, you want to vent about it. When you're happy or excited about something, sure, you'll sing and dance, but you're not going to sing and dance all freaking week. Like, it's just the nature of human being. Like, you're going to be happy, you'll be in a good mood, but like that sheer joy you had doesn't carry out the rest of the week at the same level. But when you're annoyed or frustrated by something, I think it can. I think that frustration or annoyance lasts longer. And it's easier to vent out why something didn't work or it just didn't make sense to me. It's easier to kind of spit that stuff out than explain why you liked a thing. Because sometimes the reason why you like a thing, especially when it comes to like art, is more nuanced than most people can kind of dial in on. Like, you know what I mean? So that conversation's a little bit more challenging. And I don't mean to say people are stupid. I just mean like in a general sense, it's easier to spit out your displeasure, you know?
But the nuance for me and the nuance for you can be completely different. We can disagree on why we like it.
Yeah.
Most people that hate something all kind of, it's one of the things we can all, 10 people can like something for 10 different reasons, but 10 people,
they all hate it for the same 5.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's not much variance in hate.
Right. Everybody craps on the new Star Wars movies because of the girl. Like the girl
and the CG and the politics. That's it.
And it's a rehash of everything else. And it's like, you got your 5 things. But you're right. Like people who love a thing could go on forever about it, but you do have to ask them. Right? When someone's annoyed by something, you don't have to ask them half the time. They just start the conversation with that. Oh, bro, did you see this? Did you see this fucking movie, man? Ugh. And it's like as soon as they start, I'm like, yeah, I'm not happy either, but I don't even want to talk about it with you. Get out of here.
Yeah. So,
so what would you give this movie? On a 1 to 10.
I think I would give it
whatever caveats you want to throw on there. I mean,
look, I want to say like a 7.5 or an 8. Like
Okay.
I feel like for me, it's good, and it's a high good, but it's not great.
Okay.
And I for anybody yelling at their podcast app of choice right now, I feel
please
like
remember that he just saw it now. It's a different
just saw
context.
it for the first time, but I also want to say I don't know if I would have considered it the greatest movie ever had I seen it live in a theater in 1999.
Fair enough.
I think that it would have been. I think it might have been like 8.5 to 8 instead of 7.5 to 8.
Sure.
It would have been a little bit higher. But I don't think it would have gotten a 9 or 10 from me then. Just because I am the big fucking brain.
Big reader guy. So yeah.
So like I would still pick up on all of the little borrowed elements. Like mescaline still would have been a thing where I'm like, that's a drug of like the super hippie movement.
I know that. I get that reference. Yeah.
So there are still things that would have taken me out. I don't mind, I'm always in favor of Aaron Sorkin's favorite line from The West Wing. Good writers borrow, great writers steal. Like, and he stole that line. So like that's part of the genius of it.
I hate that line, but that's a whole different thing.
I'm all right with that. Like I have no problem with that as far as concepts go.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know. I feel like you could have trimmed one of the philosophical discussions out of this and slimmed it down and made it a little more streamlined and still kept some of the mystery for number 2. Like, it's just, and I don't like, I like my movies smarter. So while this is a smart philosophical movie, beating me over the head with Neo and the One, and I can only show you the door.
There's a little bit of that. I get that.
So those are the things that kind of keep it from that 9, 10 great range.
No, but I think that's a fair score from where you're watching it from, and all the things considered when, that you mentioned, they're all, because even on my rewatch, I was kind of feeling a little bit like, as much as that's a movie made in a very modern still kind of style, it doesn't feel like dated in its kind of pacing and execution and stuff. It's not like watching something from the 70s where it's like, how long? This movie's like 5 hours, right? It's like, no, it's an hour 20, and it's like, really?
And I will say this, I do watch my fair share of movies from the 60s.
fair
so
enough.
Like, there are these movies that like so I guess what I'm saying is when I tell you I think Nolan's movies are fucking long, I'm saying that not having thought that some movie from the 1960s that is long was long, and somebody
Yeah.
does need to fucking edit. Like at this point, you're bringing art into pretension, Christopher. Learn
Yeah.
to fucking edit. Like okay,
Yeah,
so
there is a balance there for him. Yeah.
um, and I wasn't as, I guess, cultured into that older cinema back then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I don't think it would have had. I don't think any of that has an influence on me watching this now, because they borrowed literature concepts,
Right.
and I don't really see them borrowing any film concepts, which I feel like is one of the things that made this such a talking point blockbuster of that year. Well, it's not like you took, Bullet and like stole the car chases and changed them into spaceships. Like they didn't.
Well, watch part 2.
All right, for one, they didn't really do that.
No, not
so,
quite.
Like,
but there's definitely some car chase stuff. But
that's fine.
But that's the thing. What's interesting about 2 and 3 is that they do try to go bigger and better, and arguments can be made about what works and what doesn't there as well. But no, you're right. I think I agree. Your takeaways make perfect sense to me, because it is a thing that even at the time it came out, people were pointing out how layered the references were. And I agree with you that it does feel a little bit like, I'll go back to, like, I feel like it's studio notes kind of thing, like in the rewrites and stuff in the drafts, where it was like, you got to simplify this, you got to drive this home, and they just want to get the fucking movie made. Keep in mind, like, these guys, like, this is the movie they wanted to make. And they convinced Miramax to let them make it, but Miramax was like, well, you guys haven't directed anything yet. Let's see if we can come up with another project. So they wrote this script, Bound. So it's like this thriller. It's a very different movie with Chaz Palminteri, and I think, I forget the name of the women, but it's like these two women. It's a dark noir fucking crime thing where these two women kind of play Chaz Palminteri for, they run a con on him basically, and I think they kill him by accident or on purpose. This kind of thing, but it's very dark, sexy noir kind of thing. Very different, but. That movie turned a profit for a super low budget thing, and they were like, all right, we'll give you $60 million. But in $1999,
No, I get it. And I feel like that's one of those things where it's like, this will always be that one of those films. And,
sure.
I think there's an argument to be made. The 1999 was a really good year in film.
Sure.
But this is definitely one of the standouts for that year.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't like it, like, you can't ignore what it was.
Yeah.
It's in that, like, what Crouching Tiger was, or what Titanic was, or Jurassic Park. Like, it's one of those films that's like, it took something and it elevated it.
Right. And at the same time, I mean, it's doing. And it's spinning stuff into a way where for most people it's going to feel unique.
Yes.
And I think that's a thing too. It's like, oh, I can see the influences, but what they're coming up with in the end, this soup becomes this thing I've never tasted before, kind of. Or it seems like I've never tasted it. And it tastes pretty good. It's pretty good for a soup.
So, sequels, franchises, cinematography, internet hate, and my first watch of The Matrix.
Sure. It's a lot. We covered a lot of ground. There's talk that, the studio wants to kind of revive it and, mine the world, not so much Neo, but like other characters in that world, and go back to it with new material, with new stuff maybe. And like the Wachowskis won't be involved, supposedly.
Like a prequel or like a spin-off?
Yeah. Either direction, and that was talk like last year before. So who knows if it'll ever happen?
So you've watched everything at least once. Fair
enough, yeah.
Do you?
How do I feel about that?
Yeah, like, is it? Listen, how about this? I shouldn't say that. They are mining everything for everything.
Sure.
So, do you feel like The Matrix should be near the top of the list for like spin-offs?
I feel like we've been away from it long enough that you can kind of revisit it, but I don't know how you really kind of go into that world without, kind of showing me something that feels new in that world, because the three movies kind of like wrap it up kind of in a way, you know what I mean? And it's really the story of this guy who's basically
Hey, listen, they blew up the Death Star twice.
yeah,
And yet
and then made
still
some
there
other
was
kind of thing.
another
Yeah.
planet-sized Death Star. So don't tell me that first initial trilogy didn't wrap it up pretty well.
Yeah, no, I hear you. There's, there's always the prequel angle. You're right. But
Well,
I just
no,
mean like,
here's the thing. The prequel angle, I think, for The Matrix would work
yeah. What I'm trying to
because
get at is that
show
like
us
just
destroying the planet. But you can't
Right.
do anything cool inside the Matrix without giving too much away. And then it's like, well, we had this one before Neo, but nobody knows about it and it went away. But we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where you get into the issue.
Yeah, because there are things that are said in the third one that allude to a richer backstory, but it is the thing of like, with anything, it's like, yeah, but if this kind of wraps it up, it kind of like takes the steam out of the prequel stuff. Like the prequel stuff has got to be like really good in its own way to kind of feel like it's worth going to, especially if it's like, if being in the Matrix is the coolest aspect of the prequel stuff to them anyway, to like the studio guys or whoever.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that's covered in the Animatrix, which is like the end of civilization and the rise of robots, it just kind of feels a little bit like, it's like the Terminator story kind of thing.
So
where it's like, we've kind of covered that ground too. Everybody,
you and I,
and what's in people's nostalgia pocket is, the crazy action and flips and shit,
So you and I both loved the Battlestar Galactica reboot.
Right.
I watched 4 episodes of Caprica.
Mm-hmm.
4. And I went, I can't do this.
Right.
And it's because I know what happens.
Right.
And I couldn't, 4 episodes in, and I really wanted to give it a shot. I couldn't get invested because I knew how it ultimately ended, which ends up being your problem with prequels.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to be so invested,
right.
Which is why, for everybody that shits on George Lucas, he at least went in a different direction, and it wasn't Jedi.
It was
and
tariff.
It was, but it was still something slightly different, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's gonna be your issue. And Caprica's a good example because it has all the elements. Like, how did the revolution happen? Like that rise up before the beginning of Battlestar, and it's like, I don't care. Like I watched a few episodes. I'm like,
yeah, me too. And I couldn't really latch on to anybody.
And it's, I feel like that's going to be I think that's one of the reasons that for Game of Thrones, you're hearing them talk about spin-offs instead of prequels.
Yeah.
They talked about prequels once, like a year or two ago, and now all of a sudden it's all about spin-offs. And I feel like because somebody was smart enough to go like, okay, no, they can't know what's going to happen. You have to go somewhere else.
Just to put a button on that, the issue with that is that they HBO commissioned 5 different scripts, and they got it down to 3 that they were going to kind of go further with, and only 1 is being shot. And in the end, that ended up being a prequel. So the thing we're getting with Game of Thrones is a prequel that supposedly takes place like 1,000 years before.
All right,
so that's the thing. Like if you push time out from it enough, it does kind of become its own thing. And it's almost like, well, the Neo stuff wouldn't matter if we're just kind of following the early days of the Matrix and the Resistance rebels, maybe then when they're starting to build those giant pyres in the sky or something. It's kind of like how I always thought like the John Connor movie in the Terminator franchise would be a good movie. Sure. And then we kind of got one, and they kind of, not so great, not so bad, in the middle somewhere. But, that's a thing for somebody else to wrestle with. I think we've wrestled enough.
I think we have.
So we got your rating. We got your thoughts.
We did. We went down a few rabbit holes of our own.
So with that, let's wrap it up. On that painful pun, let's close this the fuck down. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been my buddy Agent Palmer. You can find him at agentpalmer.com and on Twitter at Agent Palmer. You can find him anywhere, basically, as Agent Palmer.
Except my email.
Well, which is the Agent Palmer.
That is correct.
That is correct. You can send hate mail from me to him if you want to at
That's
theasianpalmer@gmail.com. You can find me online at Twitter, Wicked Theory, Wicked_Theory on Instagram if you want to check me out over there. This podcast, WCBJ Radio Podcast, please check that out. I know I asked you guys in the beginning. I'm asking you guys again. Or at least, I don't know, give us a rating or a review over there. We could use that. It wouldn't hurt. And I don't know. Let's cue up some outro music, and then we'll just leave.
I'm just saying, pay attention to your Wicked Theory feeds, people. Bill is not necessarily back, but he's not going away.
I'm not necessarily back. I've never left, I think is what that means.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm like the guy on the couch, if you ever saw Half-Baked. I'm like Stephen Wright. I'm just always there on the couch in the background of every scene.
Yep.
I'm not far. Come back soon. I'll be here, maybe probably with somebody else, talking about something else.
There you go.
But it'll be fun too.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.